Welcome, one and all, to another episode of the Psychotherapist Podcast, featuring your favorite host, Malcolm Clancy, and your favorite therapist, Dr. Bob. In part one of this psychotherapy session, I make an announcement for a new podcast that I'm working on that shall be called The Pod That Failed. We discuss Jordan Peterson, briefly touch up on the status of JP. That leads us into a long tangent about why so many podcasters love podcasting about cancel culture. So it's gonna get a little meta. We also discuss Thucydides and the Peloponnesian War of ancient Greece. And we get into some QAnon stuff, so it's a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoy it. We'll get a quick word from our sponsors, and then we'll get lit, yo. Today's show is brought to you by Faces Brewing Company. Here is a quest worthy of every brave hero and heroine out there. Go to the forbidden land of Massachusetts, to the kingdom of Malden, and challenge yourself against Faces Brewing Company. The finest craft beers in all the land. Many have fought and died for it. See what their sacrifice was all about. And while you're at it, grab a bite to eat from some top-notch chefs that you won't find anywhere else. I guarantee you that. It's Faces Brewing Company. Check them out at facesbrewingcompany.com. Get your life game up. Alrighty, that will do, I guess. So, we're now on. We're live. We're doing it.
We're doing it, so we're on.
We on
the airwaves. Good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
Half hour. And we are about to get going here. Excuse me, Malcolm. I dropped something. Why don't you do the intro? Welcome, everyone.
This show needs no introduction, Sir Bobbert, okay. But it is the Psychotherapist Podcast, the best podcast you'll ever listen to because it has real psychotherapy sessions with a real psycho. Where else are you going to find that?
Nowhere else. Everything else is just a fraudulent attempt to be a copycat. Okay, I found what I was looking for. My pen.
Word.
Alright, so I'm good to go.
So I have an opening question for you.
Yeah.
I'm trying to plan out my new podcast. So which do you like better, at least conceptually? A show that's named like Clancy Rants or Rants with Clancy or the Rant Cast or something like that, or what I thought of last night that I kind of like and feel biased to, the title being The Pod That Failed, like the God that failed, but it's the pod that failed.
Okay, I mean I love the humor in that. In the satire, it's subtle. The other stuff is kind of in your face, the Malcolm rants.
Yeah, and also it was something that I got inspired last night because I was listening to Brilliant Idiots, and they brought up this point, if I wrote something entitled The Malcolm Clancy Show, the vast majority of people are like, who the fuck is that? And right. I don't generally make that assumption because I'd rather just, because I think the world is full of geniuses I've never heard of. So I'll listen to a couple of minutes of anyone before I decide they're an idiot or whatever. But I think there's a point there. There's something they said about also like branding, licensing, like Charlemagne doesn't name his shows or content like, the Charlemagne show or whatever. So I'm not sure what the exact legalese rationale behind that is, but on the other hand, I did think about every podcast ever, and like, I mean, what is the most popular one? The Joe Rogan Experience, you know?
Yep.
So a shit ton of people just name their shit after their name, you know?
Right.
So like the Jimmy Dore show, the fucking, you know, there's a million of them. But I do think there's something to be said of something that's a little more original. Like the Legion of Skanks is something that sticks out more than like, you know, the Jay Okerson show, you know?
Right. Yep.
So,
Right. Well, you're
I
telling
think,
the people what they're going to get when you hear the Legion of Skanks. You pretty much know what the orientation of the show is going to be.
yeah, and I think with the pod that failed, it's already like something kind of weird, which I guess fits my persona, and it's just I googled it and I didn't see anything, you know, like it. So, because for all I know, there's a real Malcolm Clancy out there who's
Yes.
like gonna be like, ah, fuck.
Right.
You know, I'm not a podcast. I can't be associated with this neo-Nazi.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that's what I'll go with.
Okay, I think they all work, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So what was the second one?
Pardon?
The first one, yeah, rants from Clancy Rants. I like that. Then what was the next one you mentioned?
The pod that failed.
Okay, I like that one. And I like them both. And wasn't there another one too you mentioned?
Nah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, like the first one is you know, variable.
Mhm.
You know, so it could be the Clancy rants, whatever. But I think I've already made up my mind. So
Yeah, it sounds like you have.
yeah.
So go for it.
All right, that's our show, everyone. Nah, I'm kidding. So
Have
what?
a good night's sleep.
So what do you have on your agenda today, sir?
Not much, but we just want to comment on something you said.
Sure.
You talked about there could be a ton of brilliant people out there who you've never heard of. And I have been, whenever I decide to go off the grid with my hypnosis or meditation stuff and explore a little bit. Exploring means I will listen to some people I've never heard of, and so I will just kind of see where the sometimes they just links just pop up, because obviously the God of all, the computer wizards, know where you are and what you like, so they send you stuff. And I have found some pretty obscure people that I thought were quite good, who might have had 2 likes or something like that, or 1 subscriber, compared to a Michael Seeley who has millions. But I find a couple, some of these people are really good, and I like what they're doing and how they're doing it. They may not have the production and the rest of it, but there really is a lot to explore out there. And I just feel bad that I don't have the time to do it.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the benefits of the podcast world, is just that there is so much content, and I honestly think with a lot of it, you can tell pretty early on whether or not it's going to be garbage or boring or like whatever. So,
Right.
it's not like a show where you got to spend you see the first episode, which is an hour, and you're kind of like, okay, I don't know where this is going, but maybe it'll be good. And then you see the second, still feel the same way. Third, okay, it's kind of suck. Fourth, oh, this is ridiculous. Oh, I just spent 4 hours on this. Where the podcast, 4 minutes in, I can probably tell what I'm getting.
Yeah, it's kind of like what did they say about a book? The first 5 sentences should tell you whether it's going to be a good book or not.
I haven't heard that before, but yeah, I mean, that's how if I were to write a book, I gotta think, this first sentence gotta be lit.
Yeah. And you have more journalistic experience than I do. Maybe it's not 5, but it's some small quantity, some minute, piece of time that they say you should know within this, without having to turn the first page or something like that, if it's a book worth pursuing or not.
Yeah.
So I kind of believe that.
I ain't made up my mind, but I'll go with it.
Okay.
Oh, so, anything else on your agenda? I saw something about our favorite transphobe, Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, I only caught a piece of that, and it wasn't much. and I didn't have the piece of paper where I wrote it down. Some professor somewhere got canned because she was teaching. Oh shoot! She wrote a book too, which I don't have here in front of me. It was a pretty cool book too. The title of it, but she was apparently preaching Jordan Peterson, and the university didn't like it. Didn't like the direction she was going in, so they canned her.
Well, let me ask you this: preaching or discussing?
I don't know.
Okay.
Lecturing. Let's say lecturing.
Fair enough.
Using Jordan Peterson's theories and ideas, and that's about all I caught about it. I saw her picture, wrote her name down, which I can text you when I find it, and the name of her book. But basically, yeah, that was just a comment on cancel culture, and offending people's rights to speak and say their mind, which seems to be the most topical sort of focus for most shows today, most talk shows anyway.
I think it's because every talk show, it's kind of like that fantasy where the sort of conservatives have that weird fantasy where they wish they were in, Fallujah, and the left
Right.
has those weird fantasies where they were, on the, what's that bridge that what's his face crossed? You know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
The Selma Bridge, I don't know.
Yep.
We all, Martin Luther King shit, basically. But,
Right.
so I think podcast hosts have a secret fantasy where they hope the mob comes after them. And I obviously try to, swing. I don't give a shit.
Oh yeah.
I think I'm hoping to kind of, South Park it, where I just am so explicit and I grandfather myself in, where it's kind of like, we just know what to expect, kind of.
Right.
So rather than trying to appease everyone and try to, have a foot in both camps.
Yeah. Yeah. When you mentioned that, the fantasy, the leftist fantasy, I think, people, leftists who wish they were fighting along Che Guevara with the Venceremos Brigade in the hills of Cuba, during the Revolution.
I'm sure some of them do, but I feel like, at least amongst my generation, most of them would have no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
Che Guevara is literally just a poster that is
exactly.
left equals good.
Yep. Exactly.
Look how handsome the left is.
Yes.
Wouldn't
Yeah,
you want to
that-
date the left? I would.
Yes, exactly. I met a guy during that time who would come from Cuba, exile, and came up, and he had a weird situation. He'd married a lesbian woman, basically just so he could get citizenship here, and I knew her, and they had a little party, that I went to, and God, he laid it on me, about all this Che stuff is just a crock of shit, He's murdered a lot of people, a lot of innocent people, and he was really ticked off that, every dorm room he visited, had Che Guevara on the ceiling. And he just said, man, these kids don't get it. They think this guy's a god, a hero. In some ways, maybe he was, but really, he was ruthless.
And that's the power of propaganda, everyone.
There it is. There it is.
So maybe we have to talk about this stupid cancel culture shit, because I'm of two minds. I suppose it depends on the circumstances, but on the one hand, it's just ignore the shit, or do kind of what Bill Burr does, where he just acts like it doesn't even exist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are some comedians that base their whole humor over oh, I'm gonna get canceled now.
Yep.
Whatever. Which is a fine grift, because sometimes it's actually hilarious. But, on the other hand, I feel like we're on the cusp of the communist revolution, and if people don't speak up now, and this is something, I don't know if I got deep into it before, but leading up to the 2020 election, there were situations where I felt like I could have talked to someone who had a very different opinion than me and have a reasonable conversation, I don't think, I never presume to change anyone's vote, but I think it's I think the someone else will do it mentality is just not going to cut it anymore. And, you know, it doesn't mean you have to go out and crusade, but I was in a position where I know I could have just at least made the arguments and have been reasonable on it, but I was just stoned and in no mood to, I mean, don't get me wrong, sometimes I'm high and I can chat till the cows come home, but sometimes, I just smoke and I'm just kind of like conflict avoidance. I'm like, because, for example, this person, who was a nice person, very anti-Trump, but not like, the thing is, so I'll give you an example of like what I mean. So remember, was it like last summer, the Atlantic put out an article where saying Trump like visited a World War One memorial, and a source said that he said all these people were suckers and like losers and chumps basically. Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
Yeah, so something like that. It was just a very vague hit piece, which I think, was basically debunked. Like a bunch of people who were there said, never happened, and I never heard a tape. There was no video. The thing is, if there's like a video or something, that's a whole different story. But if like a source said this really vague, cartoonishly ridiculous thing, about the troops being all saps and suckers, people will believe it because of the shit he said about John McCain. Like,
right.
You're leveraging that expectation or impression that people have for your own, and I could have just said to this person, look, because she said I had 2 sons who were overseas, you know what I mean? So I could never, I just couldn't, and that is like, let me put it this way. If I had 2 children who served overseas and my president was calling them suckers and I genuinely believed that, why would I support such a person,
Right, exactly.
And I'm not saying I could have changed their mind on it, but I could have at least pointed out, like, hey, I'm 100% with you if that's true, and if that is, if a tape comes out proving that, I'm 100% with you, but you gotta understand it's election season. The article that came out literally said, like, a source said this, there's no other evidence, blah, 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 blah. You got to be careful about, I'm not saying Trump is a good guy, but you got to understand that there are grifters who will prey on your dislike of them, for their own ends, basically.
Yeah, and say the most outrageous things.
Right, and having those kind of uncomfortable conversations, I think I'm just kind of at the point where I don't think silence is going to lead us to basically some commie shit, because I think a lot of people on the right and shit have just kind of been like, yeah, this shit's ridiculous, but I have an actual life to live, and who gives a fuck? They're all, these libs are all crazy, so what? You can't reason with them, which I don't agree with, I think if we're talking about really fringy people, probably, but most of us are in the middle, so.
I used to feel that way, but I'm not so sure now that most of us are in the middle. But what do you mean when you say we're on the cusp of a communist revolution?
So I'm obviously being a little hyperbolic and conspiratorial, and, this is like, I've had 3 joints this morning, so.
Okay.
But I mean to say that if people don't...
You're going to mess up the revolution if you keep doing that, Malcolm.
Oh, yeah, but...
we can't be stoned and drunk. We have to be clear-eyed, clear-brained, and all of that.
I need to tell me wits about me before that with long shakes breaks me.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, but, I don't agree. but we can circle back to that, which by Jen Psaki, I mean never, but
yes.
The point is, as far as a commie revolution, I just think I think just the corporate sort of Democrat, super neoliberal, which is actually kind of in some ways the opposite of communism, but like, it's complicated. But basically this whole sort of cultish cathedral thing, I think, is kind of winning. I think it's been spreading, I can't remember who it was, but they had a great quote where they're like, Trump red-pilled the fuck out of a lot of people, but he also blue-pilled the living fuck out of a lot of people, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And there's a real cost to that, and, you know, the more people... Did you see that political compass thing that I sent you?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that for a minute at some point this morning.
Sure.
I wanted to ask you about that, but go ahead.
The more someone like me who falls right in, like, basically, I mean, it's just a silly online test, but, you know, I would consider myself kind of right in the middle because I see both left and right as just a tool to use, you know, it's not like,
Yeah.
you know, it's just like there are good aspects, bad aspects, and you have to weigh each situation in a nuanced way, you know, but the more someone like me who's like, if you imagine the chart, ladies and gentlemen, and a cross and an XY axis, the X axis, you know, horizontal is left, right, and out of a scale of 100, you know, minus 100 being super left, 0 being right in the middle, and plus 100 being super far to the right, this, you know, test put me at basically out of 100, minus 2.5.
Okay, which, because I didn't read that the explanatory parts of that article. I just copied. I was so late at night. If you look at the time that I emailed you, it was like 11 o'clock, and I was only halfway through returning emails, so I was exhausted. So I'm going to read that today, but that explained sort of the way they approached it in terms of the evaluation and how you got that score.
Yeah, they break it down, and my point is, and why I bring it up, when someone like me, who's at like minus 2.5, is seen by everyone, you know, left of me as like plus 60 on the, you know, on the right, there's a real problem. There's a real like disconnect where, you know, it makes me think of some really scary shit that I read in Thucydides' Peloponnesian War, where he describes this sort of madness and transition of morality that overtook things. And one of the lines that really stood out to me was that any attempt at moderation was seen as weakness or cowardice or cop out or, you know, corrupt or compromise. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I find it very interesting when you bring up these historical points. And I hope that the audience appreciates that, you know, your knowledge of history, and specifically things like the Peloponnesian War. Who the hell knows about that, you know? How many people on the street could tell you what that was? But you're identifying a person, I guess a leader, right? Someone who was the leader of the country at that time?
Right, so Thucydides, you could kind of argue, at least from like a Greek Western sphere perspective, that there are kind of two grandfathers of history. Mm-hmm. The first one is a guy named Herodotus, and he wrote about, you've seen the movie 300, right?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, so I'm not saying that's based on Herodotus so much as a comic book, but a lot of people I've heard, especially like classics major, argue that that movie, as stylized as it was, actually sort of captures kind of what Herodotus was going for, where he understood that, you know, he understood that 2,000 years from now, he didn't live during the Peloponnesian War, but if he did, he'd understand that 2,000 years from now, most people would be like, what the fuck is that? Who cares? So he wanted to sort of capture kind of a sort of more cinematic vision of his, like a more storytelling, I guess, approach to history, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So Thucydides was kind of the opposite, where he lived a little later during the Peloponnesian War. He actually participated in it. I think he was a general, and, you know, was... I can't remember which side he fought for, but basically his whole approach to history is much more kind of like, I am kind of investigative journalism, going to just talk to as many sources as I can. You know, I'm going to visit all these places and interview people and try to piece together what the hell happened. And it's really, really tough because people's memories are real bullshit and selective. You know, two people who are at the same exact event will tell you totally different, you know, things. So I'm just trying to do my best here, guys.
Yeah.
And he thought that this war, this Peloponnesian War, was important to write about, I think precisely because it was the absolute moral decay of ancient Greece, where before, for a very long time, I think there was something of an honor system, you know? It wasn't just like anything goes, we'll just slaughter whoever just cuz. Like, they had to have these debates over, like, okay, this city rebelled against us, like, you know, during the Peloponnesian War. It's like, do we exterminate them all or not? And you get these speeches that Thucydides kind of bullshitted to, you know, show you the point, because he couldn't have been at all these places. But I think the real crucial thing about that book and that history is the human nature that comes out, because, you know, between just like the plague and the power and the corruption and all these different things going on, you see kind of human nature at its most sort of extreme and radical, and so much shit just is like so haunting and resonated, you know, with me with shit today, where, you know, just my favorite quote where he's describing all these internal civil wars going on in all these cities because there's these power grabs and, you know, just rivalries and people taking advantage of the chaos and all these things. There's this one line where he writes, vengeance was more important than self-preservation. That's some fucking cold shit to me. I don't know about you, but that shit blew my mind.
Yeah, that's pretty cold cheese. Vengeance is more important than what?
Self-preservation.
Self-preservation. Yeah, that's a hell of a thought to ponder, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's better to get even than to even survive yourself.
Yeah.
Basically, right?
Yeah, and sometimes this explains human motivation, because it's not everyone's super calculated and acting, you know, in their long-term interests, let's say.
No, they're acting, you know, that's the part of the brain that kicks into the impulsivity reaction, and you're reacting on that. All I want is revenge. You know, the impulse, all I want is revenge. And you can't even rationalize anything else at that point. You know, you just see blood.
I think it gives people meaning.
Yeah.
Gives them something to do.
Speak of blood, when you say red pill, you didn't watch the documentary on QAnon, did you?
I don't think I did, no.
Oh, it was very bizarre. I had a hard time following it because the characters were so confusing. They had this guy who had essentially no body. Like, he had a torso, and he was like one of the ones that they thought he was Q. Do you know anything about any of these characters?
I haven't heard of that guy, no.
Oh, okay.
Do tell.
And he was L?
No, I said do tell.
Well, I can't say it. It's too complicated for me to explain the whole thing, but there were these cast of characters that were sort of central to the documentary, you know, who were involved, these real wizards of the internet. And one was this weird guy who was kind of like a bisexual, very bizarre person. And he and his son were very much involved in putting out a lot of these coded and encrypted messages that were very central to the whole notion of QAnon and who they were and what they did. And part of this inner circle of wizards was this guy that had some strange disease that, you know, he was pretty much confined to a wheelchair, and he had a wife, and they were over in places like Thailand and South Korea, and, you know, a lot of it was in Southeast Asia. There was a lot of bizarre stuff going on, illicit stuff, but one of the things they used as a dramatic visual throughout the whole documentary was the red pill. They just kept flashing it out there, and they used that in the vocabulary in the dialogue. They would say red pill. You know, no, he wasn't red pill. You know, yes, he was. And I didn't really understand what the origins of that were. Can you explain that to me?
Can I ask you one question first? Who is making this documentary?
I don't know. I didn't pay attention to the names. It was like a 4 or 6 part. I think it was the 6th part on HBO on their documentary. series.
Right.
Which has been really good. That's a really good series they do with the documentaries, but this one was really hard to follow. You know, to identify QAnon and all these people who are way outside the lines. I mean, you talk about being way being off outside the line. Think of a baseball field. These guys weren't even in the ballpark. You know, they were operating on a whole different level intellectually and conspiratorially. So that they were talking about all kinds of stuff. How you code certain things, and they would make these presentations that this happened on this day, and if you look at these letters and you follow it to this day, it should. In their minds, they had plotted out the whole thing, and it all led back to one guy. And Trump knew what the hell was going on. That's my sort of most pedestrian explanation of it.
So do you want me to supplement that and break down the origins?
Yeah, without taking out the rest of the whole podcast.
Yeah, I'll give you the quick version. So,
okay.
QAnon, I think, was a deep state psyop.
Yeah.
I think it was something to give a lot of crazy, fringy Trump supporters something to latch onto that would.
Right. That was evident in the movie. Yes.
With the ultimate goal being to delegitimize them. To make Trump supporters look as crazy and conspiratorial. And this is where we get to the red pill, because I remember I used that term in my book, and my buddy, who is very liberal, said it's an incel thing.
Okay.
And I never heard it in that context ever, but it got me thinking, because the first time I heard red pill, I wasn't quite sure what I meant, but it's a Matrix reference. Neo takes the red pill and sees that, shit's, not as it's presented. And that's basically the idea of the red pill. It's like, it's not even like I know what's going on. It's so much as just like, okay, what's being fed to me through the TV and internet is kind of bullshit. Like, these people are, already have made up their minds. They have an agenda. CNN pretends to be real journalists, but they're a fucking high school clique at this point. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So there's disillusionment, and I think that's a big part of it. And awareness of what's really going on. But Michael Malice has a great quote where he says, you take one red pill, you don't swallow the whole bottle. So I think there are people who, like QAnoners, who OD on the red pill concept, where they think everything's a conspiracy, and they think they know a reality that you don't even know because you're not even part of it. And Q's been dropping these little tidbits that, he says Trump will appear in Saudi Arabia, and the next day he does. What's up with that? Why is he in Saudi Arabia? And there's little pockets of truth that legitimizes Q in the minds of the followers, but a lot of it's just misinformation and bullshit. And the idea was that the Democrats had this giant pedophile ring that Trump was going to introduce martial law, and they thought that's part of what the COVID lockdowns were for. So here's our chance to arrest Hillary. Really goofy, out of this world stuff. And Trump is the God savior. And ultimately, a bunch of those people showed up at the, January 6th riots, and they just got, godfathered, whacked, fucking all gathered like lambs for the slaughter, Because I think Q probably said, hey, let's do this event, guys, so we can, have the police let you into the Capitol building and take all your pictures.
Yeah,
and
this is the one we want.
You know what I mean? So I think it was a big psyop to, basically take out Trump's most craziest supporters and to pin those supporters to the other fucking, 73 million people or however many it was that voted for fucking, was it 83? Yeah. I don't know, but it was a lot of people that voted for fucking Donald Trump. Yeah. And I really doubt the majority, the plurality, anything really, the QAnon thing is a fucking joke.
Yeah, you described, you described it perfectly. You could have been a narrator for this film, because that was the essence of it. Is they were creating this idea, like that they knew what was going on and you didn't, and they knew it because of their technical skills, and because they could make all these connections. Like you said, Trump's going to be in Saudi Arabia tomorrow, and he shows up there. And they go, see, we told you that because if you followed this line of thinking or these codes or these encrypted messages, you could have known it. But you didn't know that because we're the only people who know that. So there was that sort of element of, we know what's going on and you don't.
We're so special, right?
We're so special.
And that's why you don't take the whole bottle, because, I use the term red pill just to say, hey, I'm a nuanced, open-minded thinker. It doesn't mean I have, cracked the code and I am, behind the programmer of the Matrix and I can tell you what the apocalypse is going to be and how it's going to happen.
Yep. Well, that was excellent, Malcolm. Good job.
Word.
Yeah, I basically had really only this, as I said, pedestrian understanding of QAnon. I had a hard time all along wondering what the hell it was and how it functioned.
That's why I told you I didn't need to watch the documentary, bro.
Yeah,
I was in it.
You were in it. You definitely were in it. But they had the cast of characters was just fascinating.
Do you think it'd be people I get along with?
I'm not sure.
What do you mean you're not sure?
Some of them weren't so likable.
Fair enough.
Very abrasive personalities.
Yeah.
I would say, because they use the word narcissism a lot. He's just too narcissistic, to see what's going on here. And it was interesting. So I was, for clinical, interest, I was picking up on some of the phenomenon.
So you think the QAnoners were accusing a lot of people of narcissism basically as a projection of their own narcissism?
Bingo. Absolutely.
Yeah. I see it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man, that's why you got to be careful about what you crusade against, because when, there are things that you can ramp it up against to a level where it's just kind of like, you're thinking about this shit a little too much, bro. Like, you're a little too fixated. It's kind of like if I just came out every single day and said child molesters are evil. At first it's like, hey, who's got a problem with that? But when I scream and I crusade it like every fucking day, it's kind of like, are you covered for something, bro? Like, what are you hiding? Why are you so obsessed with this? Like, what's going on? It gets a little fishy.
Yeah, it does. And the people involved, the guy with no body, he was really an interesting character. And he was just so bizarre, bright but bizarre. And, he was just like, literally like a lump. They just, like, he'd be on the bed, on his bed, surrounded by all these computers, And, it was like you're watching it, this guy's talking, and some very intelligent information is coming out of his mouth. Some of the stuff, you're wondering what the hell he's thinking,
Yeah.
I thought, the red pill might have been some psychedelic for a while there. I was thinking, are these people all tripping?
It's kind of like a psychedelic.
Yeah, well, they were, a lot of them were acting that way, they were like, they were on this, for watching, it was like you're watching the whole thing was a trip, these people are all on a trip. And
they're all following a hallucination, yeah.
Yeah, and there are certain places where they connected, and, okay, they're in reality, and other times you say, no, they're not in reality at all.
Yeah. But...
And always a connection with the Asian women, or the Asian underworld, which I find fascinating.
What do you mean?
They always lived in places like, they had residences in, like, South Korea, Bangkok. They always seem to have Asian women around them.
Weird.
Yeah, and the bisexual guy, or cloistered homosexual, whatever he was.
Are you saying there were just fucking Asian ladies just hanging around the house, just like?
Right.
Is this the help? Who are these people?
Yeah, well, the guy with no body, his wife that's exactly what she did. She'd get up and he'd say something, she'd get up and turn him around or something.
Weird. Wow.
Yeah, it's like watching a football in a bed,
Mm. So do you want to pause the video and take a hard right turn?
Yep.
All right, let me hit the